Brought to you by the AMA, CDC, and the Ad Council.
90.1
KPFT FM HD2 Houston.
KPFT.
It's Thursday, May the 9th, 2024, and this is what's on the People's News. Texas Health and Human Services under fire for not protecting kids. Republicans weaken student loan relief. A Mayday call to say no to enforcement of SB 4 in Houston. Hip-hop history at U of H. Santa Maria Hostel, a force for good in Houston. All that and more on the People's News. I'm Steve Gallington. This is the People's News, and the People's News starts now. Hi, this is Steve Gallington, producer and host of the People's News. But what is the People's News? The People's News is people-powered news. We are free to report the unvarnished and unspun truth and challenge the status quo of corporate propaganda and social media advertising disguised as real news. The People's News is written, produced, and delivered to your ears without AI. 100% built by flesh and blood people for flesh and blood people. If you have a story that needs to be told, come to us. We accept fully produced audio, written material, or just give us the idea and we will run with it. Shiny new one-hour episodes of the People's News drop each Sunday on the People's News podcast, hosted by Spreaker.com and linked to my website, Gallington.com. Thanks for listening. Federal U.S. District Court Judge Janice Jack issued a fine of $100,000 a day to Texas Health and Human Services for routinely neglecting investigations into abuse and neglect by the Texas foster care system. She also held Cecile E. Young, the Health and Human Services Commissioner, in contempt of court for not fixing the problem. This has been an ongoing problem and is the third time the lawsuit has been filed since 2011. Meanwhile, the state has appealed the court order to pay the fines. The judge's decision was prompted by the continued recalcitrance to conduct thorough, accurate, and timely abuse, neglect, and exploitation investigations by HHS's Provider Investigations Unit, which investigates those allegations from children in DFPS care. The 427-page decision reads, we talked to Karen Brooks Harper, Health and Human Services reporter at the Texas Tribune.
So this is really a struggle that's been going on since 2011 between the child welfare agencies of Texas, namely the Department of Family and Protective Services and the Health and Human Services Department, and the foster kids in their permanent custody, or, more precisely the lawyers representing them. So we've got this federal judge in Corpus Christi. She's held the state, one agency or another, in contempt 3 times now over what she sees as a failure to comply with a number of orders she's handed down over the years, all of which are an attempt to fix these problems that within the foster care system that she and even higher courts than her have said just put those kids into danger, right? And we're talking about already vulnerable, medically complex children with mental health conditions and traumas. They've been removed from their homes, either because of abuseful or neglectful homes or because their needs are so great that their parents can't handle their needs sufficiently. And then they've been placed into permanent custody, and then they face all these issues. There's reports of over-medication and investigations into neglect and abuse that just drag on for over a year, and runaways and kind of chaotic temporary homes. So there's just it's an enormous ship they've been trying to turn around, right, for 13 years. But and they've made some strides. So, and we can talk about that. I don't want to talk too long, but the latest that's going on now is that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has stepped in between the state and between Jack's latest ruling, which, as you mentioned, was to fine the HHS in contempt and fine them $100,000 per day until they could certify to the court that these investigations into abuse and neglect in foster homes have been handled completely and timely and that kind of thing. So the next kind of, big thing happening is they've got oral arguments on this set in August, this appeal, or one of the degrees of the appeal. I'm not sure where along the line that would be, but basically they've appealed to the Fifth Circuit and there are oral arguments in August. So that's where we are. Expensive thing because it would, fine because it would, this $100,000 they fine because it would end up costing like $3 million in taxpayer money per month, until they could certify that the investigations into their abuse and neglect in some of these foster place settings were handled fairly and timely and that kind of thing. They appealed. The Fifth Circuit stepped in and said, give them time to appeal, and then so they're going to spend the next few months giving their briefs back and forth and filing their paperwork in court and their arguments, and then in August they will have oral arguments on the subject, and that's probably going to be when you're going to see the next kind of flurry of activity when they actually meet up in court before the Fifth Circuit.
But meanwhile, kids are still suffering under this. Am I correct on that?
I mean, yeah, there's stuff that's changing, like staffing. I think they're trying to address some of these, what they call, children without placement who are living in temporary homes and hotels and apartments and that kind of thing. But like I was saying, it's such a big ship to turn that during all this time, these court monitors, which is what, who Janice Jack, the judge, kind of assigned to watch their backs, watch these, they run through all the reports and they audit the heck out of both of these, about these foster care cases. And so all this stuff that's kind of prompting these new orders are over things that are happening right now. Like you've got cases happening in February, where a runaway has been looked for and overlooked in a report, or you've got, investigations filed in the last year. So, whatever's going on the state side, and again, they've been given some acknowledgement by the judge that they are making steps. They haven't failed on all the orders, right? That most of them they've actually complied with. But as far as the impact it's having, the court monitors have plenty to say about what's still happening with these kids. So they're a long ways off to satisfying Judge Jack and the people that are watching that, it looks like.
It seems like, for one, can the state afford to pay this fine, these daily fines? Because, they're spending millions of dollars on the border right now, and that's correct or not, but, it seems like that's taxpayer money that's going to something that can be fixed.
It is taxpayer money that could be spent in other areas. I don't think anybody would disagree with you on that.
Okay, what happens next? I mean, it's because the thing that Paxton's the one that's actually fighting this, right?
Paxton, the one who's fighting what, the foster care thing? Well, I guess technically it's the state of Texas versus, but the attorneys that the state has hired or are, have been representing them for a long time, and so we haven't seen Paxton involved in it personally. But I have to say I'm not that familiar with how that works. I know that the firm is connected with Abbott or hired by Abbott or something, but I don't know if I would quote me on that part. I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I haven't seen Paxton arguing this in court. And he hasn't come out against Janice Jack that I know of, unless I've missed something.
What about the transgender issue? Because I know that's something Republicans in Texas are deeply against. And the transgender people that are in foster care are saying they're being taken out.
Yeah, that's an issue that that just kind of tracks with what Paxton's office and Abbott and those guys have been doing for the last few years, ever since it became a politically expedient topic for them. The foster care kids who are trans are they're easy to find. It's a difficult issue. I don't. I can tell you that the latest on the trans fight generally for the kids in Texas, inside and outside the foster care, is seemed to be kind of him trying to keep them from getting support outside the state. But the foster care kids don't even have those options. So it's a very difficult situation for them. And the closer we get to the election, it's just going to be more, kind of more of the same from that end of the political spectrum.
That was Karen Brooks Harper, Health and Human Services reporter at the Texas Tribune. Hi, this is Steve Gallington, producer and host of The People's News. But what is The People's News? The People's News is people-powered news. We are free to report the unvarnished and unspun truth and challenge the status quo of corporate propaganda and social media advertising disguised as real news. The People's News is written, produced, and delivered to your ears without AI. 100% built by flesh and blood people for flesh and blood people. If you have a story that needs to be told, come to us. We accept fully produced audio, written material, or just give us the idea and we will run with it. Shiny new 1-hour episodes of The People's News drop each Sunday on the People's News podcast. Hosted by Spreaker.com and linked to my website, Gallington.com. Thanks for listening. President Joe Biden made student loan forgiveness a linchpin of his campaign. And in spite of resistance from a conservative Congress and a conservative U.S. Supreme Court, he has managed to get in place, so far, $153 billion of relief for over 4.3 million borrowers. But if your student loans have not been forgiven, it doesn't affect you. How much more would the Biden administration be able to accomplish without resistance from the Republicans? We talked with Alan Collinge of Student Loan Justice.
Yeah, this was a readjustment count for various income-driven repayment plans, public service loan forgiveness. So the Department of Education, and I don't know why they put an April 30th deadline on it, required people, for example, who have the older style student loans, the privately owned but federally guaranteed loans, called FFELP loans, and Perkins loans as well, the chance to consolidate their loans so that they could be counted, their past payments could be counted towards loan cancellation through any of the various income-driven repayment plans. Quite frankly, to be honest, I'm a little suspicious of this process, quite frankly. It was a very high pressure sales tactic, where everybody and their brother who's aligned with the student loan industry was pushing people very hard to consolidate your loans. And having studied this problem for 20 years now, I can tell you that in years and decades past, consolidating one's loans has always been very fraught with risk. Signing your name onto a brand new loan, usually a significantly larger loan, that, capitalizes the interest and so forth, and also potentially, kills previous benefits that you may have been in line for under the other, under your old type of loans. It's just a very dicey proposition in general. So I don't know how many people took advantage of this. I certainly did not advise anyone do this. I don't like giving personal advice because, quite frankly, the Department of Education and its servicers, its contractors, they are so untrustworthy that whatever they may be promising, what we've found, for example, is that something like 90+% of everybody who have tried for these various income-driven repayment plans, they wind up getting disqualified out of the programs for one reason or another. Usually it's a matter of bureaucracy. I like to say that they bureaucratize the borrowers out of the programs so that they wind up never getting the promised loan cancellation. And at the end of the day, they usually wind up with a much, much larger loan than had they never even tried in the first place. So I get very wary when I see the Department of Education using these high-pressure sales tactics. It's almost always a sure sign that they're not doing that because they want to cancel your loans so badly. They're doing it for their own purposes. And the higher pressure they put on borrowers to consolidate, the more suspicious I become. And so only time will tell whether it turned out to be a good idea or a bad idea. But I can tell you, Rich, that what sounds like a good idea today almost always turns out to be a very unwise move, tomorrow or next year or 5 or 10 years from now.
Yeah, but it's also it doesn't benefit people that have private loans. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, people who have truly, fully private loans that aren't owned or guaranteed by the federal government, they're out of luck for all of these things. There's very little that we can do for fully private student loans. But one thing I could tell fully private student loan borrowers, or maybe two things actually. Number one, private student loans, unlike federal student loans, they have statutes of limitation. So limitations, that's a point of time span past which the loans become legally unenforceable. Usually it's between 5 and 7 years in most states. So private student loans have those, and people need to be very, very aware of what they are, just for their own planning purposes. If someone is just vastly over their head in private student loan debt, maybe, an option would be to sort of wait out the clock and don't do anything to reset the statutes of limitations on the loan. But the only thing that we can do, we the people can do to fix the private student loan injustice, and it is a huge, all student loans are just massively unjust, is return bankruptcy rights to the loans. It's the stripping of bankruptcy rights from all student loans that have turned them into, licenses to steal. It's really weaponized the debt. And so there's a bill now from Steve Collinge in Tennessee. I don't have the bill number off the top of my head, but what it will do is return basically standard bankruptcy rights, same kind of bankruptcy protections that exist for all other loans. It will, at long last, return those rights to private student loans. So I would urge everybody out there to find that bill, maybe contact Steve Cohen themselves, and really call their own Congress, House of Representatives, and urge them in the strongest of terms to co-sponsor this bill and do whatever it takes to get this bill passed. Yeah, private student loans are really tough. Yep.
So the president's saying that this is a better way of getting people out of the debt they're in.
Well, President Biden is completely untrustworthy on this issue, and I'm sorry to have to say that. We're a firstly nonpartisan group, but before the 2020 election, Joe Biden was promising that he would eliminate the federal student loan debt of everyone who went to a public college or an HBCU and they earned less than $125,000 a year. He did nothing like that. And all the loan cancellations that we're hearing about today, quite frankly, these are loans that should have been canceled by law or by rule years or even decades ago. So President Biden is just sort of pointing to these loans that were scheduled to be canceled anyhow, claiming credit for them. And meanwhile, he has completely broken almost every presidential campaign promise that he made prior to the 2020 election.
But to be honest, he had to pass it through Congress, and Republicans have been fighting him on this left and right. And they went on a media campaign telling people how they're getting suckered and how working people are going to have to pay for it.
I totally hear you. The Republicans are, there's no word I can think of other than just evil on this issue. And, look at the state of Texas, for example. People in Texas owe over $140 billion in mostly federal student loan debt. And every time we see any loan cancellation effort by the Biden administration, Republican attorneys general across the country, including, I believe, Texas, they sued to stop these cancellations. Like, I just don't understand how any Republican governor or attorney general can be fighting loan cancellation. So, I mean, that's a great point. It's not like the Republicans are good. They're actually worse than the Democrats. But my only point is that Biden's claims that he's trying as hard as he can to cancel student loans are really disingenuous. Because, for example, Donald Trump, believe it or not, he actually was the first president to cancel loans broadly by executive order. He did it for disabled veterans in 2019. And then he did it with the onset of COVID when he first did the first repayment pause. That canceled a huge amount of student loan debt broadly, and he did it by executive order. And so, you know, the politics that have grown up around this whole thing, the partisan politics, have really just thrown a wrench in the works. And, you know, Joe Biden could have used the Higher Education Act to do his loan cancellations that the Supreme Court struck down. He didn't do that. The Higher Education Act gives the Secretary of Education very broad authority to waive, compromise, release federal student loans, federally owned student loans. And, you know, I just have to look at this whole thing and say, you know, what I conclude is that, quite frankly, there are pretty dark forces on both sides of the aisle that really want to protect and perpetuate this lending program. You know, I quite frankly don't think that Biden was very serious about that Supreme Court case. You know, Nancy Pelosi and other leading Democrats, they spoke publicly against that effort. And I think they were quite pleased when the Supreme Court ruled against the loan cancellation. So I think it's kind of a uniparty thing where kind of a good cop, bad cop thing where the Democrats have the white hats and the Republicans have the black hats. But at the end of the day, the entrenched interests in Washington, D.C. are getting everything they want. You know, the loans are now turned back on. We still don't have the bankruptcy rights that exist for every other type of loan in the country. And the loans are still as predatory and as sort of weaponized as they've ever been. It's student loan borrowers today are looking down a very, very dismal path. And one other thing, this is the big picture. So in the first 3.5 years of Biden's term, he canceled about $160 billion in student loan debt. It sounds like a lot, and, you know, indeed, some people are benefiting, and that's a good thing, and I'm glad. But during that same time period, $350 billion in interest alone typically is added onto the debt. So, you know, Joe Biden or any other president, they can cancel like they have been at this rate forever. And we'll still see the federal loan portfolio grow by nearly $2 trillion over 10 years. So the problem is not solved. And this April 30th deadline that just came and went, I don't put a lot of stock in it. The problem still persists, and the overwhelming need for the citizens to get our leverage of bankruptcy returned remains probably the most important thing that needs to happen, and hopefully before the election, we'll see.
What is the just one more question. Can you explain to working people how this does not affect taxes? They're not paying for the taxes of student loans.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that's probably the number one claim. Why should my tax dollars pay for your college? The fact of the matter is, Rich, that the people, the borrowers, have paid. If you look at the Department of Education cash flows on the lending program over many years, you'll see that the borrowers have been repaying essentially what the Department of Education has been lending out year on year. So the $1.7 trillion that we're looking at now in outstanding debt, that can be represented basically by interest, interest and some other fees and other things. So the people have repaid the taxpayer what it lent out by and large. And in fact, every nickel of that $1.7 trillion outstanding, it could be canceled tomorrow without needing one dime from the Treasury. In other words, no money needs to be spent without adding a penny to the national debt. And you can't say that about, PPP loans or other things. So essentially, you can do it for free, and the taxpayer realizes no actual cost. And so really, the federal government has managed to get tens of millions of people college educated for free. And that's with total student loan cancellation. That's a pretty good deal, I think. And, let's also remember another big picture thing. When this program was rolled out in 1965, President Lyndon Baines Johnson declared that these federal student loans would be free of interest. Well, today, $100 billion a year in interest clicks off. And, that money goes directly to the Department of Education. And this is the sort of government profiteering that really just makes no sense. In the military, the DOD doesn't profit on anything. The Department of Health doesn't profit on anything. The federal government is not a business. It was never meant to make a profit. So, even Donald Trump agrees with that sentiment, by the way. So this should not be a controversial issue, and it's just it's very frustrating to see how people who don't know about this issue have been essentially conscripted by the people trying to keep this lending scam going, and they're fed these lines, and they get these emotional responses that their tax dollars are paying for people's college, and it's just false.
That was Alan Collinge of Student Loan Justice. You can reach him and his group at studentloanjustice.org. Hi, this is Steve Gallington, producer and host of The People's News. But what is The People's News? The People's News is people-powered news. We are free to report the unvarnished and unspun truth and challenge the status quo of corporate propaganda and social media advertising disguised as real news. The People's News is written, produced, and delivered to your ears without AI. 100% built by flesh and blood people for flesh and blood people. If you have a story that needs to be told, come to us. We accept fully produced audio, written material, or just give us the idea and we will run with it. Shiny new 1-hour episodes of The People's News drop each Sunday on the People's News podcast. Hosted by Spreaker.com and linked to my website, Gallington.com. Thanks for listening. On Tuesday, April 30th, community members marched in front of Houston City Hall to demand better protections for workers and pressure their city council to make a public commitment to stop family separations and other harm caused by Texas Senate Bill 4. They asked Houston City Council what they were going to do about enforcement of SB 4, which can be used to racially profile Latino people and question their immigration status. Those at the rally stated that the Texas bill is unconstitutional and racist in its origin. Anyone can call in a neighbor and report them just based on them thinking that they might be Latino. We talked to Esme Ledesma of Workers' Defense about the rally and SB 4.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Tuesday, Workers' Defense, staff, members, allied organizations, and community members showed up at City Hall to demand better protections for workers and immigrants in the city of Houston. We all know Houston is a beautiful multicultural city, and to see a lack of protections from City Council and from the mayor is a little bit disheartening. So we went there, we gave comment in front of City Council and Mayor Whitmire to ask them to make HPD not enforce the law. We also had a rally outside where our members and different allies at different organizations spoke and gave comments about their experiences with immigration in the city and their experience as immigrants living in the United States.
One thing about that is the city did not. You didn't get any type of guaranteed effects. I know that the union, the police union, has said the city has not given them any type of directive on how they want it enforced. What is the mayor and what is city council saying about the enforcement of SB4, or if they want HPD or Harris County to enforce it?
Yeah, we didn't get any solid commitment from Mayor Whitmire or from City Council. We did get some comments in agreement mentioning the unconstitutional nature of the law, but mostly waiting to hear back from the courts that it's currently going through. Different city council members mentioned speaking with the police department, but nothing regarding like actual tangible ways that they have been in contact with HPD or any other entities in the city.
For people that don't know, tell us going on about SB4 and how it affects people of color, especially in the Latino community.
Yeah, SB4 is a bill that essentially legalizes racial profiling in the state. It allows any peace officer in the state of Texas to stop and question anyone they think who might be undocumented. And if they are convicted or have reasonable belief to think they are undocumented, they'll be processed and potentially face deportation. But that raises the question of, what does someone who is undocumented look like? And when we see in the media the images and videos about the quote-unquote border crisis, we tend to see a focus on the southern border, the Texas-Mexico border, and people coming in from Latin America. So it just creates this notion that people who are brown or look Latino or may not look necessarily quote-unquote American are undocumented and should be stopped and questioned and processed as such.
Even people with citizenship will be stopped also. Even though if they lived here or were born here, they still can be stopped and questioned. So it is racial profiling.
Absolutely, and there have been instances where people who are citizens have been detained and questioned and sent to processing before authorities figured out that they were citizens of the United States.
Also, if you're in a car with somebody that's brown, the police can stop and even arrest you for not engaging the police officer and giving them the information that they want, if they so please.
Mm-hmm. They'll be given trafficking charges, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and is that going to be effective as far as all of Harris County, and where is it now as far as it being enforced?
Yeah, my understanding is that they're currently being held not necessarily enforced in the state yet, waiting to hear back from different circuit courts to understand the constitutionality of these laws and really determine if these are laws that are enforceable and are just and right in the state of Texas.
Will that go for enforcement by ICE? We know ICE were doing raids on different work sites, looking at people with violations of their immigration status. Are we looking to see that in the near future?
Well, it's something that we are seeing now, we have seen, and it's something we will likely continue to see, especially knowing the current political climate regarding immigration. This general sentiment of a crisis and something that needs to be stopped has created a lot of hostility towards immigrants and leads to many people publicly outcrying for tougher crackdowns on different immigrant communities, which in turn could lead for calls to more raids on work sites for people who they may think are undocumented. So again, this goes back to racial profiling and the overrepresentation of Latinos, specifically in construction or manufacturing, service industry, domestic work. These are places that will be targeted specifically for the community that works there, not necessarily industries that people don't typically see Latinos. So maybe in finance, like you'll never see a bank be rated for undocumented workers because it's not where people think they are.
That was Esme Ledesma of Workers Defense. You can reach them at wdactionfund.org. Hi, this is Steve Gallington, producer and host of The People's News. But what is The People's News? The People's News is people-powered news. We are free to report the unvarnished and unspun truth and challenge the status quo of corporate propaganda and social media advertising disguised as real news. The People's News is written, produced, and delivered to your ears without AI. 100% built by flesh and blood people for flesh and blood people. If you have a story that needs to be told, come to us. We accept fully produced audio, written material, or just give us the idea and we will run with it. Shiny new 1-hour episodes of The People's News drop each Sunday on The People's News podcast. Hosted by Spreaker.com and linked to my website, Gallington.com. Thanks for listening. Hip-hop is over 50 years old. Developed in the South Bronx of New York City in the 1970s from black and brown disadvantaged youth, it has grown into a billion-dollar industry. Some of the elements of hip-hop include rapping, breakdancing, graffiti, and DJing. The University of Houston recently had an event called the 9 Elements of Hip-Hop, giving credence to the culture.
I'm Dr. Williams. We had a 9 Elements of Hip-Hop presentation for this course, just kind of displaying all the 9 elements, the foundations of what it means to what hip hop means to our communities from a local level, from a national level, as well as global. So they got opportunity to share those different 9 elements in more detail.
So my name is Christopher Knight. I'm the program director for Africana African American Studies Department at the University of Houston. What actually went on today was a historical synopsis of something that I lived through. It's funny saying hip-hop in an academic setting. It was befitting, based on what has happened over the past decades, that the students had the opportunity to learn about the evolution of hip-hop.
Let me just say what we focused on. What we focused on, realistically, is understanding the true meaning of what hip-hop is. Let's start there. It's a voice. It was a voice for everything that was going on as far as our culture and to cry out, to talk about the things that, as far as poverty, to talk about all the misconceptions of how things are, how things should be. It was a true voice. This is how we live. This is what's going on. This is how we look. Things that's going on in the government. Things going on politically, local politics. All those different things, and understanding the true core of hip hop. Those are the things that we tout. We wanted to foundationally understand. Well, what does hip hop mean, and what is hip hop? What does it mean to me and my culture? So that is the true things that we focused on in the class. Now, we touched on the artists. We touched on from a perspective of gender, of race, of politics. And so with all those things, it made up great conversation. It made up of them having a pure understanding from a political way how we've been so suppressed. And when I say us, as people of color, and how things were taken from us, and how things are always continuously taken from us and repurposed and monetized. And so from land to our intellectual property to all those different things. And so here comes, the teacher in KRS-One who foundationally just put the framework around hip hop. We understand Kool Herc. We understand Africa Bambaataa. We understand those people who Grandmaster Flash. They learned all of that. but what truly happened? Like, what truly has hip hop done? We live it every day, so we can't dismiss it. But structurally, how do we embrace it, and how does it become a part of your everyday lifestyle? These are the things that we discussed, and in the class, they had the opportunity to partake in, and they loved it. They ran with it. What was shown tonight was very foundational. They had to understand the foundation before they could start talking about, okay, I can make this change, I can do this, because hip hop, it was disruptive. And I'll end on this part. Anything that people don't know about, it becomes a problem. And if you want to truly make change, you have to be disruptive. So I hope they're taking these different things into their own careers, their own life, and hopefully it'll make something of themselves as they leave this class.
One thing that the situation we have right now is very, very important. Hip hop is very important right now because of what's happening. Especially African American Studies departments around the country have been attacked.
Right.
We have a government now that's trying to attack African American Studies. What can you take from this and try to save African American Studies at this school? That's a big question.
That's a big question for me to answer as far as saving. I think that we all have, in anything that we do as a culture, we got to stick together. We gotta be involved. We be cohesive. We got to all have to collectively move together. And hopefully these students in which they got, hopefully they're able to reach each one, teach one, and they can reach one. Like, hey, these are the pillars in which we need to survive and how we need to walk in society. And that's what we wanted to teach. So if they're able to go reach one, let's pull it back. Another, pull back. Another. Because community is everything, right? You coming here at U of H, people are from everywhere. So if this is the community in which you reside, you're here for 4 years. How are you going to effectively impact that? Take those experiences and go back to your community in which you reside, in which you live, and go make an impact. Until we decide to make that happen, we're going to continue to see the things that we're seeing with the I'll call it abomination of DEI, right? It's ludicrous that is happening. I'm not a fan of it happening. And I'll say this, when I was working on my paper for my doctorate, one of the things that I talked about was the lack of African Americans, especially people of color, in sports, and it's in Power 5. And the things that I found were so foundational is that the way that we think, there's only a certain level that we can go. If I see, for example, I play sports, the only thing that I see is a coach. I feel that's as far as I can go. After I'm an athlete that's played all my years, that's all I see. But no one has ever come to me and say, hey, have you ever heard about being an athletic director? Have you ever heard about administration? The business of what it is that you do? And so that's the second phase of what we're trying to do here at U of H, is most likely adding the business element to hip hop. These are the things that we can do. You can make this happen. Go empower your community that way. We just want to do our part.
That was sound from the 9 Elements of Hip Hop Symposium at the University of Houston. Hi, this is Steve Gallington, producer and host of The People's News. But what is The People's News? The People's News is people-powered news. We are free to report the unvarnished and unspun truth and challenge the status quo of corporate propaganda and social media advertising disguised as real news. The People's News is written, produced, and delivered to your ears without AI. 100% built by flesh and blood people for flesh and blood people. If you have a story that needs to be told, come to us. We accept fully produced audio, written material, or just give us the idea and we will run with it. Shiny new 1-hour episodes of The People's News drop each Sunday on the People's News Podcast, hosted by Spreaker.com and linked to my website, Gallington.com. Thanks for listening. Santa Maria Hostel announced that it was awarded a Healthy Kids, Healthy Families grant by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas. The HKHF funding will support Santa Maria Hostel's commitment to community-based organizations supporting children and families that focus on health and wellness and target impacts of socioeconomic and social determinants of health, as well as economic opportunity. We've had Santa Maria Hostel on as they do so much work in the community with women and children. We talked with Nadine Scamp, CEO of Santa Maria Hostel. This is from a show in 2022.
Sure. So the mission of Santa Maria Hostel is to empower women and their families to lead healthy, successful, productive, and self-fulfilling lives. And we provide a full continuum of services for our women and families that range from community-based prevention programs in the schools to community intervention programs for families with young mothers to residential and outpatient treatment services and longer-term housing and recovery supports. We're one of the only places in the state where a mom can bring her children with her while she accesses residential treatment. And we have a particular focus on mothers who are pregnant or postpartum and are bringing children with them because we know that's such a barrier to care if a mother doesn't know that her children are safe and secure while she's trying to access treatment.
You guys are now receiving Healthy Kids and the new Healthy Families grant that you got from Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas.
Yes, we are so pleased that we're able to partner with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, and this is for our Caring for Two program, which is a home and community-based intervention that's designed to improve maternal and child outcomes for women who are pregnant or have young children, and it really helps mothers and families build safe, stable, nurturing relationships with their children. It promotes early childhood brain development, and it helps our children reach their full potential in life. We really focus on participants that haven't had those same opportunities as others to build that type of nurturing environment because they're struggling with housing instability, substance use challenges, maybe experiences of domestic violence or abuse, other histories of trauma. And so we really work on a two-generational approach because we want to build that entire family well-being and resiliency, including supporting mom's physical and emotional health, and helping that family improve their social determinants of health, which is, your things that impact health outcomes like stable housing, transportation, positive support network. And so we do this through an integrated team. So we have what we call our parent coaches, which are master's level clinicians, and then we have our recovery coaches. And these are women who have lived experience in recovery, and they tag team together to provide services out in participants' homes or other community settings where they might already be receiving services. So we may partner with a domestic violence shelter or with a health clinic so that we're helping to reduce some of those barriers to care by bringing the services to them. And the services that we provide are really tailored for that family because we want to make sure that mom gets exactly what she needs and wants on her wellness plan. So we provide parenting education and coaching, education on baby safety and infant care, screening for postpartum depression and other behavioral health issues, peer support, mental health counseling, linkage to other levels of care if needed, whether that's prenatal care or residential treatment, and then care coordination to walk with that mother through all those different systems that she's encountering. So, we actually will go with her to doctor's appointments or help her fill out an application for benefits. We are able to walk with that family up to 18 months. So it's a long-term relationship with this family, helping them meet their personal goals for stability, for recovery, and for wellness, because we want that entire family to be able to thrive.
One thing that I liked about Santa Maria was that you take a woman and you get her out of the situation that she's in. She can't have any type of visitors, and she's able to, even if she has kids, she's able to get away from the situation that she's in, be it violence or drugs or whatever. She's away from that situation for I don't know how many months, but a chance to get healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely in our residential programs, we're able to bring them into a very safe and supportive environment. And that allows them that time to focus on recovery and building healthy relationships. One of the great things about the Caring for Two program is that follows that mother no matter where she is. So if she's in residential services, that team from Caring for Two works with her there. And then as she goes back out into the community, that same team is with her. So they're there to support her as she might face, new challenges integrating into the community. So if she's looking for housing, for example, they may go with her to check out different apartments, make sure the neighborhood is safe, make sure it has, all those amenities that we want. It's near good schools, it's near daycare. They're able to serve as that emotional support system. So if that family's having some challenges, they've got someone to talk to, and then it continues to provide that behavioral health counseling that families may need. So you can do couples counseling or families counseling or some brief interventions. So it's a great way to build upon the successes that individuals have had in residential treatment. And then it also helps those families that maybe they don't need that higher level of care in residential, but they do need that support. And so Caring for Two is able to provide that out in the community and work with them in their neighborhood, keep them in their neighborhood by giving them the skills and support and access to resources that they need.
You get out of treatment, you get back on your feet, but then you relapse and end up back. How do you guys deal with that?
So two ways. One, building in these programs like Caring for Two, like our recovery coaches that are able to continue to provide that peer support, access to positive social networks in the community has really made a difference in helping our women with sustaining long-term recovery because they're connected still. We know that connection is so important for long-term recovery, and having those positive role models, having positive peers, people to rely on that are safe and healthy. So it's a great way that we're able to help our families be able to sustain long-term recovery. And then if there is a challenge, if somebody does relapse, they're welcome back. We want to make sure that anybody that is having issues struggling with substance use, that there's no shame. If you are asking for help, we want to be able to give you help. And so if they need to come back into residential treatment or into an outpatient program, we help connect them with that.
Because the pandemic brought out one thing, and that's having the problems with abuse in a household. How do you deal with that, especially getting the woman back on her feet? She gets to housing, and the same person that was the abuser comes back into the scene. Is that something that you guys work on, and how do you do that?
So definitely that family coach, parent coach, counselor that's working with the mother is helping her with learning about safe coping skills, safe relationships, what is a healthy relationship, and helping her identify when those patterns are not safe, and then helping make a plan. We also work with wonderful partners out in the community, Houston Area Women's Center and Fort Bend Women's Shelter and Montgomery County Women's Shelter, various places that are specializing in helping individuals that have been impacted by domestic violence. And we make sure that we all work together for keeping this individual safe.
How can people get in touch with you if they're out there listening and in need?
So we have on our website, which is www.cftu.org, santamariahostel.org, there is an online screening form. So they can go and fill that out with their basic information, what type of service they're looking for, and then that goes to our admissions department, and they will get right back in touch with that person and make sure that they're linked to those services that they need.
All right. And for people out there that want to volunteer, do you take volunteers or?
Absolutely, yes. We love our volunteers. We have volunteers that, do everything from teaching classes to helping in the donation center to doing landscaping. Whatever your passion is for volunteering, we will find a place for you.
All right. And just one last question. You have residencies all over the city. Am I correct, or is it's one or two locations?
So we have two main residential locations, and then we do our outpatient services, which with COVID are mostly virtual. And then the Caring for Two program is at multiple sites throughout the greater Houston area, and we try to bring those services to our families.
That was Nadine Scamp, CEO of Santa Maria Hostel. If you know someone in need or you want to volunteer, you can go to their website, santamariahostel.org, or you can call 713-691-0900. Hi, this is Steve Gallington, producer and host of The People's News. But what is The People's News? The People's News is people-powered news. We are free to report the unvarnished and unspun truth and challenge the status quo of corporate propaganda and social media advertising disguised as real news. The People's News is written, produced, and delivered to your ears without AI. 100% built by flesh and blood people for flesh and blood people. If you have a story that needs to be told, come to us. We accept fully produced audio, written material, or just give us the idea and we will run with it. Shiny new 1-hour episodes of The People's News drop each Sunday on the People's News podcast. Hosted by Spreaker.com and linked to my website, Gallington.com. Thanks for listening. The People's News is a production of Steve Gallington and Richard Hanna and is protected by copyright laws. All the information broadcast on air and online, as well as published in both print and or online, including articles, audio clips, illustrations, graphics, photographs, and videos, are protected by these copyright and other state and federal intellectual property laws. Therefore, you may not use our content in any prohibited way, including reproducing, publishing, transmitting, selling, rewriting, broadcasting, or posting on the Internet without the expressed written permission of the People's News. Prohibited use also includes publication of our material in printed or electronic brochures, newsletters, or flyers, as well as all website or email distribution. To obtain permission to use copyrighted material, email Steve Gallington at steve@gallington.com. Thank you.
Hello, this is Dr. B. I do a program called Bartlemania on KPFT HD2 every Saturday from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. You know, some stations in Texas have lost their local announcers. Some cities even decided to use a national service to bring a wide variety of music to their communities and no longer have a connection to their towns. Houston is lucky. KPFT is programmed by your neighbors, folks who live down the street from you. KPFT knows what is going on in the community and reflects performances that happen right here. Become a sustaining member today and help keep KPFT local. Your donation at 713-526-5738 makes it possible. Please call now. That number is 713-526-5738. Or if it is more convenient, use our website, kpft.org. That's kpft.org. Thank you.
Hi, this is Arnie Arneson, host of The Attitude with Arnie Arneson. So who is this Arnie person? Well, I delivered my first baby without the benefit of health insurance. As a young state rep, I breastfed my second kid on the floor of the legislature. I gained a reputation for talking truth to power, and in '92 became the first female nominee for governor. beating my party chairman and our 5-term congressman. Today, I describe myself as a politician in recovery, but the constant in my life, my love affair with political talk. Tune into The Attitude with Arnie Arnesen, Monday mornings at 5 a.m. and Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 a.m.